Welcome to the Third Win channel. Today we're reviewing the third episode of the new iCarly Reboot. We have done episodes 1 and 2 already on this channel, so I recommend you check those out first. And lastly, a spoiler warning for episode 3. Pause now if you have not seen this episode. Now, let's get into the review. The episode is called I, Fox Apologize, and the synopsis reads, a former teen internet sensation and her friends navigate the challenges of adulthood. Sometimes they get it right, and sometimes they get things kinda wacky. Now, let's briefly break down the plot for this episode. Spencer has created a new sculpture and invites Carly and the gang to witness it. The reveal gets overshadowed by some old food Spencer serves, which includes an old meatball that Carly spits out. Harper takes a picture of Carly trying the meatball where she makes a weird face, and long story short, Carly posted it online and it blew up, and also became a meme template. There are two conflicting thoughts on the actions to take from there, with Harper wanting to monetize it by making merch for the meme, and Spencer wanting to make it disappear as it is affecting his artistic career. Carly decides to side with Harper and talks down the severity that Spencer claims this has, and in the meantime, as a subplot, we have Freddie and Millicent argue over a post Freddie made many years ago claiming that he never wanted kids. Millicent says this is traumatizing, and it might be, but Millicent uses this to take advantage of Freddie's soft-handed parenting. Back to Spencer, Carly, and Harper. It is the day of the gallery, and when Spencer is ready to set up his sculpture there, he gets disturbed by an influencer and breaks his sculpture, but in the process, gets an idea. Spencer opens the Museum of Influence, a museum that mocks influencers and what they consider to be art, including memes. He focuses on pointing out that they are empty and meaningless, but when Carly promotes the event on Instagram Live, it causes people to storm down to the gallery and protest, which displays cancel culture in full effect, as Spencer is getting canceled for mocking influencers and other different aspects of the internet. The episode's ending, which I am somewhat confused by, is Carly and Spencer apologizing for causing each other distress. Now that we've talked briefly about the plot, let's talk about the characters in this episode. First up, Carly Shay. Carly deals with her first real publicity since starting iCarly in the form of a meatball meme. She is reluctant to capitalize on it as she says she's just started posting again and it feels it might be too early. But eventually she decides to capitalize on it, and in her own words, she says that influencers are getting younger and there are so many new platforms, so she has to do something to stay in the game, and that it is important to capitalize on trends as they come and go fast. Carly, however, struggles to understand entirely what the right thing to do is, as all of this still feels like uncharted territory for her, and her best interest is still to help her brother. We also learn that, according to Millicent, Carly is a saint and has not done a single bad thing. Next up, let's talk about Freddie Benson. Freddie was almost entirely out of the spotlight in this episode, and all I can really mention is that his parenting is something that he still needs to work on big time. But it is obvious that he cares deeply about his relationship with Millicent. Let's follow up with Spencer Shay. Spencer feels art has changed and is no longer respected in the way it was before, with meaningless jokes being far more important. He seems bothered that the gang, which once idolized his sculpting, now seem disinterested. Spencer releases his frustration several times in the episode, but I can't help to take Spencer's side on many of his points, which must mean that I'm getting old. It might seem like he has changed his viewpoints and attitude from the original series, but I believe that this is fully in line with his character. Next up, Harper. Harper displays how business savvy and socially advanced she is. She capitalizes on a trend and makes some good money, selling $40 t-shirts, which is quite expensive for a t-shirt. She continues to be supportive to Carly, but I also think that she has a negative effect on Carly's morals in this episode. Moving on, and finally, we have Millicent. Millicent is a brat, an egotistical one, but also a smart one. She, like Harper, is also business savvy and is not worried about the consequences to those around her for her own self-gain. She is also seen to be quite manipulative towards her father Freddie as well. Now, let's talk about some other mentions and Easter eggs. This episode has a large focus on cancel culture, influencers, and memes, and it makes a brilliant callback to a meme from Drake and Josh, which Miranda Cosgrove's character Megan Parker was involved in. I think this is a really wholesome moment, and in the process also acknowledges Drake and Josh. This episode also features a pandemic joke, which is made very obvious, but I do like how self aware the writers are in this episode. Lastly, there's also mention of Fox apologies or fake apologies, which come as a result of cancel culture. But in this episode, we don't really get any Easter eggs to any old iCarly stuff, so that's kinda sad. Next, let's look at some analysis and takeaways. I think this episode's concept is genius and thought provoking, but the execution is poor. The writing follows a fine line between clever and cringe, but it's difficult to understand what angle the writing was taking. If this episode was a mockery of modern internet culture, then the cringe is to mock. If it was not a mockery, then it's just cringe. But this is just me personally. I tend to be more interested in the episodes which focus on the characters rather than an idea. And the episode's plot, very weak and confusing in my opinion. To me, this is my least favorite episode of the three first ones we've seen so far. Pardon the rant, what else can we gather from this episode? Freddy is definitely still evidencing poor parenting, which takes a complete opposite approach from his mother. Maybe he is slightly traumatized from his mom's parenting and does not want to repeat it. Nothing against Mrs. Benson, of course. I think this episode also showcases Carly's strong sense of morals. We can see herself considering consequences to those around her. I like to see this from Carly as it reminds me of the original show. And lastly, Spencer. I personally gained a lot of respect for Spencer in this episode, and I think his deep confliction and worry for internet culture is valid. But that's all for me in this episode. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Was it cringe? If you enjoy these episode reviews, make sure to check out our two previous ones if you have not already. And subscribe for more weekly episode reviews, as iCarly episodes will be rolling out weekly from now on. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.